Just as a reminder, you can visit us at thepandapod.com. That's thepandapod.com to grab our RSS feed, listen directly, and share PandaPod with your family and friends. You can also reach us directly via email through podcast at thepandapod.com. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Panda Pod, everybody. This week I'm your host, Justin, aka Wiggy, and with us we've got our usual suspects, Jeff.
Hello.
And Rab.
How's it going?
This week we're giving updates on our favorite topic of aliens. So this is Aliens 2, Return of the Aliens.
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. Um, so we really wanted to start off with talking about an episode of a popular podcast that Grouch was a part of, and some new information that kind of came to light from that episode. And we've tapped our residential expert, Jeff, to kick that off and get us going. So, Jeff, what did we learn from that? Well, maybe first name it, and then kind of let us know what we learned from it.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to bask in the glory of being the resident expert of anything. I don't really feel that one, but
You've earned it.
Thanks. I sure do
You're
Google well.
yeah. I mean, we do what we can do, right?
Right.
Like we work with what
Uh,
we got.
I am an armchair expert at aliens, let me tell you. Yeah, so David Grush was on an episode of Jesse Michaels' podcast, American Alchemy, and it was like a long interview, like 2 hours long.
We'll link it, of course.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the Discord. But there was so much covered in there. It felt like a lot of like sudden disclosure was going on. And I don't know that it was so much disclosure as much as it was just kind of bringing all of the different things that have recently come to life like together.
Right.
Yeah, so let's see, big things they covered: the way that the Atomic Energy Act was used to cover up UFO research in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. So, like, they mentioned the fact that it was written by somebody who had been previously involved in UFO stuff, right?
The act itself, I think the person had previously been involved in what's the Oppenheimer thing?
Um,
Manhattan
The
Project.
yeah,
Manhattan Project, right?
I see. But then didn't that person have some kind of ties to UFO? Like, but I feel like there was a lot of speculation in the video, and I guess it's not a total fact, but I feel like they speculated on the idea that that person put it in there specifically for UFOs, having known about something that maybe the public didn't.
Gotcha. Okay. I don't remember that part, but again, it was a long video. There was so much packed in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of
there's
it was speculation. I mean, I think and I think
True.
that's good because I mean, Grush couldn't speculate in front of Congress, right? He had to tell what he believed to be the truth and only facts.
Right. And as you're watching the video, it becomes pretty clear that Jesse Michaels and David Grush have become kind of buddy buddy. And it made me feel while watching it that it was like David Grush like really strongly hinting to Jesse about things to talk about that he just can't confirm or deny, but he knows needs to be out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting. To Jacob's point earlier, I remember that there was the senator who proposed the bill also had a hand in did have a hand in an earlier uh, UFO committee. type thing. So yes, he was connected to both the Manhattan Project and this other UFO committee. And there's been a lot of speculation that not only have were they working on the the bomb um, at the location of where they were doing the Manhattan Project, but also they were using that same area to then um, house UFOs or UAPs, whichever. Um, so there is a lot of connection there.
Now, I can't remember. Was it in this video where they started talking about just how frequently nuclear locations have been affected by like UAP activity?
Yeah, they did talk about that, and they also mentioned an interesting thing, which is that like Grush said, like he believes that that's partially because that's just where all the sensors are, at military bases and stuff.
Right, right. I did immediately after that Google how to acquire like like air traffic control quality radar
How
and
many
found
thousands of dollars was that going to cost?
it doesn't even matter. Like it's just completely illegal for citizens to own
Oh
that
wow,
level of radar. Yeah. So like how could we possibly track this stuff? You know?
dang.
Yeah.
Well, that's super interesting to know that we can't even if we wanted to. And I mean, I can see, and once again, this is them saying that we can't have things because of security problems, right? The reason why they
Mhm.
wouldn't want regular people to have radar is because you don't want regular people to know when planes are flying overhead, because you may potentially be able to do something about it, I guess, or
Sure.
track them,
Yeah.
whichever.
You know
So
what? I
I
didn't
get
even
it,
think about
but
that, honestly.
yeah.
I was just like, why don't they want me to see where the UFOs are? How come they're not letting me look at all the other dimensions here? What's going on? But no,
How
that
come
makes
they
a
won't
lot
let me buy a surface-to-air missile?
of right. Yeah.
I
Right.
found this nice Ukrainian guy who was going to sell me one.
Oh
Yeah.
man. But I mean, that also kind of goes with another story from later in the week. The UAP. Actually, I think it was the following week. The UAP NASA press conference that they did, talking about their report that they released.
I was going to ask, so that one, they were talking about how they would do research into UFOs, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they were talking about how they want to go about collecting data, which they talked about releasing a smartphone app that people could record data on and send into them. And
Hmm.
that made my sacral get real unhappy.
Why is that?
Just something about the government controlling like completely that much data, like their ability to gather the data and then manipulate the data and disseminate it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I think
Like,
that today they have that ability through social media.
sure, yeah, but like, I don't know. Might have been nice if a non-government third party
Really though, with as
non-profit
many
preferably company would take over this kind of research, you know.
with as much collusion as there is between companies and the governments, it doesn't really matter who gets it at this point. Like it's gonna be controlled by somebody who we don't want it to be controlled by. Like because we just don't have the resources to put something like that together ourselves. Like
Sure.
so
Yeah, I don't really see any other way to go about it either. Like I get it. Like if a government agency is going to do it, I guess I'd want NASA to be in charge of it, you know.
Right.
But it's just kind of got Big Brother vibes as far as like controlling the narrative of what people are reporting.
Well, I do think it would probably be better, like if we could just conjure that app into existence, assuming they're not just like, because aliens are popular right now, let's hold a press conference to get NASA's name in the news. Assuming that's not what they're doing,
Right.
and they're actually going to make the app, I do think that that would encourage people to potentially see things that they wouldn't otherwise see as a maybe like strange paranormal encounter as a paranormal encounter. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like the fact that
Yeah.
they're even writing it down.
Yeah, that is true. Hmm.
So a couple of things to consider. First thing that I want to do is I want to go back to that document that we were talking about, that law that's in place.
Right.
And essentially, so just to give a quick like what that's about. So when the Manhattan Project launched, the government started to think, okay, so how do we handle secrecy when it comes to nuclear material? Do we, just hide it behind regular classified? Do we just, classify everything at the same level, or what do we do? So not only did they do that, but they also put in like special handling instructions, essentially, on who's able to access what data, and it has to be compartmentalized. Um, and so now anything that has to do with nuclear based energy, which is also um, a big assumption on how um, you know aliens essentially would be powering these crafts that they use is through nuclear power. So any crashed retrieval that they pick up, or any uh, like you say, even biologics, anything that has to do with involved with a crash like that is subject to these strict rules. So they just all they use that one tool to hide everything as deep as they possibly can. So there's that. Secondly, when it came to that NASA um, uh, conference that they did, they said that they weren't going to establish like a director that's going to be presiding over like creating the way to get the tracking and process completed for tracking these things. And they just came out and said that they do have a director. And there's a name that's being thrown around. And they said originally that they weren't going to announce who it was, because people on the team were getting death threats.
Oh man.
Um,
Yeah.
essentially for even looking into this stuff. Um, so they
Damn.
wanted to get. So there's a chance that they're essentially naming somebody who isn't actually in charge, but there's also a chance that this one guy is the guy that's in charge. I don't have his name up ahead of me, but they just announced that. So, and this guy was the liaison to um, liaison from NASA to the White House on UAPs. He
I
was like a
see.
liaison.
At
Um,
what period of time do you know?
I'm not quite sure how long he's been doing it for, but that's what the guy's job is.
Oh, that's what it is right
Um,
now.
yeah, that's what it is right now.
I see.
And they're supposedly naming him as the director over that program.
Cool.
So we'll probably hear his name pop up a little more. But even though they said that they weren't going to make a director or name him, and then they did it, which in itself is weird and sketchy. So,
Okay. It looks like his name is Mark McKinney. No, Mark McInerney. Yeah, Mark McInerney.
Okay.
Yeah. So there
yeah,
we
so
go.
Mark McHenry was the new supposed director of this trekking program and the process behind it. So
Yeah.
if we hear what happens with that and where that goes, that's who we'll hear it from probably.
If you hear in the news that he died, the death threats worked, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yikes. Okay,
So
so let's go back to Grush's interview. That was a bit of an aside there. Another thing they talked about was this like huge swath of time in the like 40s and 50s where there is this apparently just huge amount of research into anti-gravity. That was like, it was like really picking up, and then for some reason just kind of died off. Um,
Right.
I think that the name Townsend Brown was a part of that. Like, he was a scientist that worked for some government agency and did like these insane spy missions, like parachuting in behind enemy lines to go and find out more about like anti-gravity research being done by the Nazis in World War II.
Yeah, and they talked about the Foo Fighters in there too. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So the Foo
Which was like
Fighters.
supposed Nazi planes or something like that. That, I mean, that's what people thought they were, or when they encountered them. I think is like some kind of crazy Nazi tech. But I mean, looking back on it, seems like maybe it was UFOs.
Yeah, and that it kind of makes sense in my opinion. Like, you might look at it and go, "Well, why the hell are aliens siding with Nazis? That's terrible." But if you look at it from like a mothership over Earth looking down kind of scenario, it's us that are testing nuclear fucking weapons. You know what I mean?
Right.
We
Well,
probably
and
look like
also
the ultimate bad guy.
there's no guarantee that like they were actually siding with the
Oh,
Nazis either.
sure,
Like
right.
they
I'm
could have
sure
been
it
doing
wasn't like,
anything.
right. I'm sure if it was aliens, I'm sure they weren't like in cahoots with, you know. But I could see aliens being like, "Oh, these guys are building and testing these nuclear bombs, and they're coming in these planes and dropping the bombs. We should probably stop all these bombs from doing their thing." You know, in my
Right.
mind, that checks out.
I could
So,
see kind of. I mean, it's known that the Nazis were trying to develop a nuclear weapon. They had some level of uh, like knowledge that something could be possible like that. And so, I mean, I feel like maybe the aliens were investigating that. I mean, it's a little later on
sure,
in the video, but they talk a lot about the fact that nuclear sites have had a lot of UFO encounters, and
right.
so it could be something along those lines, where I mean, the aliens just happen to be there, and because we have technology monitoring the Nazis, we see the aliens, and we're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, so in Oppenheimer the movie, they talk about how the Nazis went on the path towards. So there's two different paths that you can go with nuclear, right? You can go exploding nuclear, and you can go nuclear energy, right? And so like energy creation. So in the movie, I don't know how accurate this is, but in the movie, which they said that the Nazis veered off on the course of nuclear energy, and hadn't discovered the way to make the explosion, which is the only reason why we got it first.
Hmm.
Um, my guess is that probably tracks. That makes sense, because otherwise they would have had it.
Okay. Can I
Right.
can I speculate? Can I paint a yarn? Is that the phrase?
Paint a yarn? I've never heard that before.
Can I knit a painting real quick?
Yeah, can I knit a
Can
painting? Can I knit you a quilt with panels that describe the story I want to
can
tell
I
right now?
can I crochet a picture?
Okay, so what if the aliens were flying over Germany, or some Nazi occupied area, and one of their ships crashed or was knocked out of the sky, and the Nazis discovered it, and they were utilizing that like nuclear energy, and that's why they veered off on that5 because they stole the technology. I have no proof of any of this,
Yeah. Well, that'd
but
be
it's kind of
wild. I
pretty
mean,
wild.
it would kind of imply, if that was the case, if the Nazis could so easily recover that craft and reverse engineer the technology, that like nuclear energy could have saved us from climate change back in 1930, if that was the case.
Right, but I think we kind of know that, don't we? Like that we were like on the verge of that technology pre World War II, and it just kind of got put on the shelf. Am I
Yeah.
making that up?
I
I
mean,
feel like
it seems true. It seems true. I mean,
yeah.
it would be, obviously it would be a big cover up, right? Because like,
Hmm.
I mean, not I certainly would not deny the fact that lots of people have spent a lot of effort covering up climate change so that
Hmm.
people won't react to it. Um,
Hmm.
but I mean, it would be a pretty wild cover up to have the solution in hand and then decide not to use it.
That is true.
So just to do another backup. So you mentioned we're talking about anti-gravity,
Hmm.
and you were talking about Thomas Townsend Brown.
Yes.
And Thomas Townsend Brown was a scientist who came up with this idea of using a specific material to create anti-gravity using saucers.
Right.
Um,
Bismuth, right?
yeah, using bismuth. And so here's the thing. Um, now, at the time, he was pretty much labeled a quack. Every physicist um, pretty much just said that he was wrong and it didn't work. It doesn't work. Um, and they could never prove it. Um, now, something interesting that is relayed in the video, in the Grash video, is that Townsend worked for a company that was called the Glen L. Martin Company in Maryland. Um, now, what what is interesting is the Glen L. Martin Company became Lockheed Martin.
Right.
Lockheed Martin
Right. Right.
helped with the development of our first stealth bomber
Right. At the Skunks Works facility,
and
right?
Skunk Works, correct.
Yeah.
So there is a direct link from Townsend working at the Glen L. Martin Company to Lockheed Martin helping to create our first stealth bomber. So we definitely have some. I mean, once again, who knows? Why would they put it on the shelf for so long? Did they not quite figure it out? Did it take some time? Who knows? But this is also covered up. We didn't know about the stealth bomber until it was active. They did a release. Like I remember it on, like watching it on the news. Like they
Sure.
did like a release saying, "Okay, we now have a stealth bomber," and that was because they wanted the world to know that we had a stealth bomber, right?
And it was cool as hell
It
too.
was, yeah, it was super cool. It was crazy cool, crazy cool. So the B2, yeah, the B2 stealth bomber.
Yep.
Um, so yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to give that background because
Yeah.
we're moving so fast this episode that I want to make sure people understand what we're talking about. So
Right.
Right, right. I mean, there's so much covered here. Everybody should just go watch the video. It was very
Certainly.
interesting. Whether you believe it or not, I mean, some of it's indisputable. There's a lot of stuff there that's just it's been declassified. It's admitted that it's happened. And again, it's just kind of gathering the information, and then there is speculation on what it could all be. But like one of the things that is like that came to light and that we've known about for the atomic program was like our poaching of Nazi scientists.
Right. Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, Operation Paperclip. Yeah. Um, that's pretty crazy. Like I had heard of it. Like I had been outraged by it in the past, but never really like done any like research on it. It's just like, of course we stole Nazi scientists.
and the ones that we didn't steal, uh, Soviet Russia got. So
Mm,
the ones that we didn't take, Russia took. Um, and so there's there's a reason why when we started looking at going to the moon, um, or the space program in general, a lot of the scientists came from Germany. A lot of those same scientists, and Russia made it first. Um, I mean, they did get a guy out there for a a walk around uh, the stratosphere,
Right.
oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. The space
but
race stuff.
yeah, for the space race. But I mean, uh, that's really where that came from. Were those scientists
Hmm.
from Operation Paperclip? So
Yeah, I
definitely,
guess so. It was like pretty well known that we had done that for the space race stuff, but not as well known that we did it for the atomic energy stuff, right?
Sure. I mean, they're definitely also experts, right? There was a race. It was a race between us and Germany. There wasn't the Russians really weren't looking into it, but once the war was over, they realized, oh crap, this is something we have to look into now because we're already behind. So whatever, like I said, whatever sciences we didn't get, they did get, and that was purely just so that they could start developing, like you said, they could start developing.
Yeah. I'm gonna go off on a little tangent if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I was just thinking about like the race to space and like how there's currently a space race to get to like the South Pole of the moon and how India got there first and like how like they did it for like $52 million. Like seriously, like you could win the Powerball and like apparently with India just build a base on the moon with it. Like they don't need a whole lot, I guess. I'm not sure how that works, but I mean they did it. Some of the like pictures and stuff they're sending back are incredible.
Wild.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I
so
mean, we
maybe like with some like patience and hard work and dedication, I don't know, we could do all this stuff and not spend a bajillion dollars doing it. You know?
I mean,
Right.
well, let's be honest. Let's be honest here. I mean, part of it is our military industrial complex, right? Like that's part of it. Um, and
Certainly.
why we spend so much money. The other is with India. I mean, so let's take it back. So it's been said, and it's pretty obvious that, so as far as technology goes, we made it to the moon based on the computing technology of one of our cell phones. That's essentially what you need in order, like that's the power equivalent of the technology that you need to be able to do the calculations to get yourself to the moon. And my theory is that it's all just a bunch of they just took over a bunch of Bitcoin miners, and just took over their GPUs and their video cards and just hack together the power that they needed to actually do calculations and get everything together. I mean, it can't be. I mean, think about it. It takes what, like, I mean, you can make a plane for what, like, I'm sure they make planes for what, 10 million. Like, I'm
Well, I
sure
mean, it
they
depends
could.
on the plane, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, but I mean, assuming, well, you also have to assume that tech or labor's really cheap in India, right? Like they spend $1 an hour to pay what you would
Sure.
pay like a scientist in America, $500 an hour to do, right?
Yeah, you know
Like,
what that tells me? Our scientists are overpaid.
yeah, I don't know, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
always heard that they weren't paid enough,
Well,
but I mean, if we're thinking about it this way, maybe they are overpaid.
the military industrial complex, like the reason it fits into this equation is the fact that any such program in the US has to have a bunch of people at the top like soaking up money basically.
Right. And like so much is tied up in military. Like even non-military spending is tied up in military. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Which is so silly.
it would be over the military's jurisdiction to oversee anyway, because they have to do clearance. They have to do clearances. They have to approve on what time and where you could shoot something off. Like it's all wrapped up in our national defense. Um, and I mean, we can go on about that for
Right.
hours. So
Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this Grush interview.
Well, one thing we kind of missed in the beginning, they talked about before there was the nuclear like act that kind of put a lid on it. There was a military program that was specifically designed to like push a bunch of propaganda saying that UFOs didn't mean anything and they were all fake.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's been disclosed as well, hasn't it? Yeah.
So that was pretty
Right.
interesting. Like that
And
was the
that
policy
also
before we got the Nazi scientists, I guess.
Oh, yeah, and apparently maybe Kennedy was killed because of aliens. That was the biggest stretch, in my opinion, in that
Yeah,
episode.
sure. Well,
one
they even
thing
said in the video it was a stretch.
Right.
one thing that they did say, is that program was based out of Skunkworks. Um, and it was essentially Skunkworks that made both of the videos. They made both videos that were saying that propaganda, saying that aliens weren't real, and they also made war propaganda. Um,
Sure.
like for the army, for the air force, for the navy, like they did all those videos, and they all came from the same place. And they also did, I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but they did some videos showing way 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 back in like the 30s when we were testing the bombs, and some of those videos are kind of whack. Like there's one video that shows, um, an like right before a nuclear bomb goes off. Right, there's like this house, um, and it's just this house. There's no like cars or anything around it, anything like that. And then the bomb goes off, and you can see like the shock waves, and the dust like kind of like go over where the house was, except miraculously there's a car there now.
Huh.
And they
I
all
have
look,
seen these as well, yeah.
yeah, and they all kind of look like miniature models, like when you
Hmm.
when you like so that all came from the same place. That all came from the same like propaganda factory.
Okay, my new
Under that
conspiracy
program.
theory is that the moon landing is real, but nuclear bombs are fake.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah, I'm down for that too. I'm down for that too. I honestly feel like that's a lot more realistic, in my opinion.
But they definitely could have like faked a video just because they wanted to show people a video, and they could still be very real, just not like as impressive. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, the original thing wouldn't be as impressive because the shock blast from where that house was, from where the bomb went off, like everything was just much bigger than it should have been.
Sure.
Like it really seemed like tiny miniature models.
Yeah, I think I also saw a video of an explosion in a house, and like if you looked behind the house, there was a tree, and the tree just like wasn't moving at all, even though the house was like
Yeah,
on
well,
fire. You know?
yeah, there was also this other one where, okay, so assuming you wanted to film this, okay, you wanted to film something like this, you would literally have to have a concrete bunker, right, facing the opposite direction, so that the like blast didn't like destroy the camera.
Right.
But what you also have to keep in mind is that this is nuclear radiation, right? And so they were able to film this stuff without the radiation destroying the camera or the camera moving at all.
Well, or the radiation destroying the quality of the film, because isn't it like if you try to film certain stuff, like you just see like specks in the air? Like I've seen those photos online where people take like a picture of a radioactive material, and it's just like cloudy, basically, like you could barely make it out.
Really, I haven't seen that, but that is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. You're the resident expert on nuclear radiation, Jacob. Good job.
Well, maybe those are
Congratulations.
fake. Who even knows?
So they also talked a bit more, like Grush allowed himself to speculate a little more on maybe why aliens are here, in his opinion. And this really lined up well with a theory that you mentioned on the last Alien episode, Rab, was the idea of nuclear really being the like pivoting point. And like aliens, like specifically, he even said almost specifically, I think, that in his opinion, they're here because we took the wrong path with nuclear. You know, we went the warhead route versus the atom splitting, maybe interdimensional travel route.
Right. Yeah, I mean the tie-in with nuclear. I feel like has always been there. Like Area 51 is nearby nuclear testing sites, and I don't remember what it was used for originally. It might have been one part of the time. Who knows? But I mean that southwestern U.S. desert vibe. They both things have that vibe at the very least.
Yeah, for sure. And he really seemed to like lean into the idea of interdimensional beings being what he believes they are, which I thought was really cool because, like, I don't know, I just think that's a very interesting concept. We talked a little bit about this when we were talking with Bianca,
Right.
um, but like, and a little bit on the last Aliens episode too. They kind of, I think it was actually Graves that talked about the cube objects and how, like, the cube objects with the sphere around them that he and his crew saw over the Pacific, about how those could like potentially be like higher dimensional objects that we're only seeing like the three-dimensional shadow of.
Right.
So I don't know, like, it seems like, at least for maybe Graves and for Grush, that they feel like there's compelling evidence for that, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I guess I mean maybe it's possible that, or at least the aliens believe that as long as they can keep us from blowing ourselves up long enough, we'll eventually take the other path and realize we don't need nuclear warheads. We could travel through dimensions and stuff instead.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of an aside, but I was listening to like a spiritual energy update by like my favorite spiritualist Jessa Reed yesterday, and somebody mentioned, I don't remember if it was her or somebody I was talking to in the chat, that this coming April, she seems to think there's going to be some kind of event involving the interdimensional things, or maybe she didn't mention interdimensional directly, but I kind of intuited that that's what she was saying.
Sure.
But anyway, that kind of lines up with that like 300-day timer we were talking about in the last episode. Like, that's right around that time. So I don't know. That got me thinking about maybe, like, I don't know how that date popped up into my algorithm, or like how I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was like a day or two where I just had like video after video after article, like, all talking about this like event in 300 days. But
Hmm.
You want to hear some conspiracy that I just came up with?
yeah, I do.
Okay, so do you know what else is supposed to happen in April?
The eclipse.
Mm, well, no. What else is supposed to happen in April is, so Americans were paid a lot of money during COVID, correct?
Yeah.
We were given stimulus and all this other kinds of stuff. Well, a lot of people actually took that stimulus money and put it in the bank and kept it there. And it's been helping people like kind of like slowly keep um their financial state stable. So they're still spending money. People who have this money and people who were able to like job hunt into job hop. Jesus.
I really like job hump. That was a
Job
good
hump.
Fucking job humpers, man.
Job
man.
humpers. Job
Every
hump.
time.
Job hop into higher paying jobs of like well over $10,000 more than what they were making before.
Sure.
In April, that money's supposed to run out.
What do you mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
If people keep spending the way that they're spending and the way that they have spent since COVID, that extra money that was printed is supposed to run out of the economy, out of household income.
As in,
Um,
like, people were spending it slowly,
As
and they'll have
people are spending it
lost.
slowly, yeah, people spending it slowly or not spending it.
Sure.
will have lost that extra money come April. Also, that's supposed to coincide with what the government is saying will be the purported beginning of the next level of the recession.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay,
So coming this Easter, recession and aliens.
excellent. And a total solar eclipse over North America on April 8th. Okay, I was right about that.
Okay.
Okay, so those three things are happening at the exact same time. So there's a run out of money, so people won't be spending as much, which means the economy is going to take a hit. Aliens are going to come down while nobody has money enough to leave and go anywhere else to avoid the immediate whatever of aliens. Um, and then at the same time, there's going to be a solar eclipse that hides the aliens from coming down.
Maybe the aliens are going to come give us money. You never know.
Maybe. I mean, money's just a concept, and now I'm on the same list that Bianca's on.
If I ever see an alien, I'm going to ask it for 250.
Tree fitty?
350. Yeah, damn it.
Yeah, tree
No, say
fitty, bro.
250. Say start your own thing, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 250. 250 from now on.
Okay, let's see. I guess the last thing I want to touch on about the Grush interview was like towards the end, he kind of opened up about like himself personally a bit. I thought that was really cool. He was talking about how he found out later in life that he's autistic, and I feel like that's something I know I can relate to. Justin, I know you can relate to, and just hearing like somebody in that position talk about his neurodivergence and like how he used the like kind of autistic superpowers you get like observation and um like figuring out how to like respond to people and like figure out how to determine what emotions people are trying to evoke, how he used that to his benefit when doing all this research. I thought that was really cool. Then he also talked about how he's having kind of a spiritual awakening after some time of kind of agnostic view on things. So I thought that was
Right.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty relatable. I don't know if I relate to adult autism or not. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who know me who would say yes, but I don't
Right.
know. I'd never really thought about it one way or the other.
I hadn't thought about it until this is a weird time to talk about this, but my sister last January 2023, my sister called me and she's like, "Hey, bro, I just got a new therapist on BetterHelp." And like after 20 minutes of talking to her, she was like, "Hey, I think you might be autistic." And she like was kind of freaking out about it and she was like, "Do you think I'm autistic?" Like, and at the time I was like very firmly in the like, "No, of course you're not autistic. That's crazy. If you're autistic, I'm autistic."
Right.
You know what I mean? But I don't know, that thought stuck with me and I started like reflecting on like how I interact with people and like these different waves of like um
If you ask me, as somebody who's known you a really long time,
mhm,
I think you migrate towards the ADD side of the spectrum. Um, like towards the space out a bit, kind
mhm,
of like I don't know, like that kind of makes sense to me.
mhm.
There's things that I don't see,
Sure, but
but I
it's
do
definitely a
kind of
spectrum.
see that. Yeah, it's a
And
spectrum, so I do definitely kind of see that.
yeah.
With your sister, if I think about her and I think about your dad,
Yeah, that's
I
really what it came back to at the end for me. It was like I was like, well, if I'm like maybe have these signs of autism, like I probably got that from somewhere. And then I really started thinking about my dad, and I was like, oh, hold on,
yeah, he's
hold
more
on
of
a second.
the OC. Yeah, he's more of the like the OCD, side of things. Your sister's very like attention detailed as well, um, and so I definitely see that with them.
A big thing that I know my sister and I both suffer from, I think my dad does too, is like the idea of like burnout, and how oftentimes burnout in neurodivergent people can be viewed as like depression instead of what it actually is, which is just like being overwhelmed and unable to like let go of those feelings and it building up to a point where you like are unable to do anything.
Right.
Yeah,
And
overstimulation is bananas.
yeah, and like using that like reflection and like thinking back on like events in my life and how I handle them and the mental states I was in at the time. Like I'm starting to be a little kinder to my past self and like the way I handled situations, because like I really do think I was like in these like intense periods of burnout, and just unable to pull myself out of it because I didn't understand what was going on, you know. Um,
Right.
so I don't know. I kind of maybe unfairly or incorrectly, just like when I was hearing David Grush talk about his story and like his frustrations and trying to like make it in his career and things like that, I just kind of went, oh, you know what? Like I can kind of relate to that in a lot of ways.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about his video. Definitely go watch it. I feel like we should get to the stuff in Mexico though soon.
That's true. Oh wow, we are like 45 minutes in now, aren't we?
I mean, we obviously brought up a lot of stuff that's completely unique to us. It's not like we're just like rehashing his 2-hour video.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, one thing that I want to say is I appreciate you saying that about talking about how that made you feel, because I just stopped it while I was listening to you. I was thinking about things about like being kinder to my younger self, and I mean, my wife tells me all the time like that I'm such a sensitive person,
Mm.
and I know I can be very sensitive, but I also I feel like I have this switch where I can just turn emotion off.
Oh, I have that too, man. Yeah.
And like it's this really strange duality of personality, because I can be crazy cold hearted,
Hmm.
um, and I can just turn my emotions off and it doesn't matter anymore. Which I've actually found to be, at first I thought it was kind of like a superpower. I'm like, man, I'm like Spock.
Right. Yeah, you can
But
get lost in that like that over glorification of stoicism. You know.
Yeah, I was like, man, this is awesome. This is totally a superpower and something that I should like reach into more. But I've come to find that it's hindering me more than it helps me,
Hmm.
because I live in a world with other people, and the best way to interact with other people is kindness, right? And you
Right.
can't do that when you have no emotion because you can't be empathetic. And so well, like I was saying in the beginning, I'm glad you said that, because I can look back at my past life and look at some of the things I did and realize, like, man, I was so cold hearted when I just need to be kind, or I was really, really in my feelings when I should have looked at this objectively. And
Right. And we spend so much time like reflecting on our past like every day. I know I do. I try not to. I try to be more present, but like when you're able to reflect on that and then go, "Oh, you know what? During that conversation when I said that thing, I was just having a hard emotional time and you know, I just didn't handle that situation well and I should forgive myself and move on."
Sure.
Like why spend so much time just rehashing the past to yourself and feeling bad about it? Like I feel like I've spent a lot of my life doing that, and like my newer perspective on things are just like, you know what, learn from it and just let it go.
Well, there's an evolutionary reason for it. I mean, you're literally like training your social skills as a organism that like evolved eventually to be a social organism, but like started out as something different, right? I
Hmm.
mean, and like, I mean, I'm talking about the grand scheme of humanity, right?
Sure, sure.
And so, I mean, there's a good reason that our bodies do that, but I mean, if you manage to control your emotions, and I'm not saying I'm good at it necessarily, you can recognize it as that and just kind of move past it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, speaking of dishing up the past, um, we were
Your transitions have gotten real dad jokey, and I appreciate it.
yeah.
Every
So
podcast needs
speaking
good
of the
transitions.
yeah,
Agreed.
so speaking of the past, we do have these aliens that were supposedly dug up in Peru,
Right.
Yeah.
and were displayed on television in Mexico. Um, so there's a couple things I want to talk about here. Um, so the first thing is that the main scientist behind this, the things that he's done in the past, they have been quote unquote debunked. Um, and what they're actually talking about, so just so that you're aware, is not something to do with aliens before. What they're talking about is this scientist dug up some bodies that he thought were mummies, and they wound up just being like really well preserved children from way, way, way back in history. They
Okay.
weren't actually mummies like Egyptian self-contained through the process mummies. They were
Sure.
just really, really old bodies.
Right.
And there was some
Um,
controversy about like some of the bones not even being human, correct? Like being found nearby and just associated with the body.
yeah. So I mean, so essentially, this guy's an amateur archaeologist, right? Like he's obviously not all of the things that he's done has been like by the book, right? Or maybe he's just gotten unlucky or whatever the case may be, right? So that's the background behind this guy, is that he does find things, but maybe not exactly what he says he found.
Right.
Or so there's a little bit of um salt to be taken with this information. um, so that's just the background. I'll let you guys go a little bit more into it.
Okay, well, I'll say a few things. I was pretty hyped during the thing. I let myself get pretty carried away with it, and it's mostly because the week, like 2 days before, I had taken part in this like death workshop with a friend of mine who runs it named Jonathan, and part of it that we did was like journey work into the underworld to like assist a being with passing into the next life, and it was just like a guided meditation thing. But when I was doing mine, I had like pretty vivid visual imagery of like assisting what looked very much like one of those creatures that they displayed in the show. The one I was with was much taller. It was like maybe 10 feet tall, like tall enough that it could easily rest its hand on my shoulder. But otherwise, it looked a whole lot like that. And so when I saw that, I was like, yeehaw, we're here. I assisted an alien in the afterlife. So that, I don't know, I got a little swept up in that. But there's definitely like several articles I've read about how other scientists are going through the like DNA records that they released and saying, okay, yeah, not all the DNA here matches human DNA, but it is all like DNA that could be found here on Earth, you know.
Huh.
So it may not, be worth getting all excited about, but again, that's just referencing the stuff that this, amateur archaeologist slash journalist has had done himself. It doesn't seem like it's really getting as much attention as maybe it deserves,
Right.
but who
Well,
knows? Maybe it doesn't. Who
to me, it
knows?
seems like one thing that would be required to prove that those are alien bodies, or at least one piece of evidence you would definitely want to gather, would be done by dissecting them, right?
Right, and which they kind of did through like radio imaging.
Okay.
They released some very interesting like imaging of the bodies. I imagine with them being like what 10,000 years old or something like that, that they're probably pretty much stone at this point. You know,
Okay.
Like I don't think a whole lot of biology can survive that long to actually be dissected. But
Sure. I mean, I know it wouldn't be like dissecting a frog, but
right,
like, wouldn't you still have like caverns inside you where your organs were or something?
I
I
don't
guess your
know.
skin wouldn't survive. I mean, well, that thing has a face though, so like, why wouldn't its skin survive? I guess.
Looking at that thing, I got the impression that you weren't really looking at the skull, but like the stone being chipped away around the skull. Um, so that's not. I don't think that's necessarily exactly what the thing looked like, And even
I
again in
see.
the radio imaging, they had much more of a rounder forehead than what you could see in the images they showed
Hmm.
live. I do think it was interesting and really sensational. The idea that it had some egg, like one of them had eggs inside of it. Um, and they did some radio imaging of the egg as well, and it looked very much like an embryo of, you know, like a human embryo, but different.
Sure.
Yeah, so the statement by that guy is that 30% of the DNA isn't something that could be found on Earth. And that's what they're currently investigating. Um, the guy says that there is a 30% of the DNA that's not here. So, but they did have a Navy doctor scientist look at it. He's the guy who did a lot of the scans and things like that. Um, so we'll definitely have to see. Um, the crazy thing about this is that these guys look like E.T. from the movie E.T. Um, like extremely similar. Um,
Yeah.
and and so there's a funny story, and this is something that's completely true as far as we can tell. And you can even look this up on YouTube and listen to it. Um, so Steven Spielberg, who directed E.T., did a private screening of E.T. for Ronald Reagan in the White House with about 30 people that were there. And when the screening was over, Reagan came up to him and kind of looked around the room and said, and these are in Spielberg's words, so you can look it up. And I'm probably gonna miss it a little bit and paraphrase, but he kind of looked around the room and was like, thank you for showing this to us. Um, and essentially was kind of like, there's a lot of people in this room who know about this, um, hinting that yes, this is what these things look like.
Right. It seemed like he said almost like yeah, this is a lot like what it's actually like. you know
Yeah, yeah. And so this is the story from Spielberg of the conversation that he had with Reagan in the White House after screening ET. So there is some correlation there, if you believe what he says, which he seems to be a pretty. I don't know why he'd lie.
Sure.
But he
Yeah.
was also young, right? So this is when ET came out, which was 1982. So he was definitely a lot younger then. So maybe he was, kind of tooting his own horn or something. But that's an account from him. And you know, there was this fiction that right after the movie was shown that Reagan was like kind of rushed out of the room by somebody, and he says, you're not going to remove Reagan from the White House. Like that's where he is. He's not going to allow people just to like remove him from the room just so that he can't talk to you about this.
Right.
Um, so take that for what it is. But as far as like the visuals, um, that's the backup story.
That's the biggest thing I've heard from people in response to this, and I think it's ridiculous. People are like, "That can't be an alien. It looks too much like an alien." It's like, come on, okay, if this is what people are describing that they see as aliens, and this is what we're depicting in like pop culture as what aliens look like, why can't that be what aliens look like?
I mean, it may be the thing that the government says, like, this is what aliens look like. It could be a psyop.
Right, it
That
could be
this is
soft
what,
disclosure.
yeah, it's like soft disclosure. This is what aliens look like. We're gonna make sure that everybody's used to what aliens look like when they come down, so that they don't think that they look like Alien from the movie Aliens, and they're trying to eat us. Right? They just look like
Right.
little harmless dudes that
They're
have
just little guys.
glowing little glowing fingers,
You
right?
can't you can't
And
get
all
mad at
they
a little
and
guy.
all they want to do is go home. They don't want to
Right.
cause any harm. They just want to go home. And that's just be nice to the little alien dudes. That could be what it is. It could, there doesn't have to be a menacing side to it. We assume that there's a menacing side to the alien situation because we're basing things that aliens may do based off of our barbaric human interests, and
Right. Yeah.
it's something that we understand. We understand violence, right? So we can say, okay, well, aliens could be violent. We don't know. They could be like cows and just not give a shit about anything. Like that's also possible, like I don't know. But anyway, I'm done with my tangent and my rant.
Sure, and I think please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think Spielberg was brought up in the David Grush video under a different context.
Was he?
I think so. I think they talked about somebody who had briefed him or something like that, like, or maybe he had a disagreement, a strong disagreement about what UFOs and aliens were like with some big alien guy. I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
Oh, yeah, that was about the Close Encounter of the Fourth Kind. Is that what the movie's called?
Third kind, I think.
Third Kind. Yeah, something about a creative director or a consultant who was also part of the UFO like government project, who was being consulted, and yeah, I do remember something about that.
Like
So
he had a really big argument with Spielberg about it or something. I mean, yeah, go watch the Grush video for sure, and let me know if I'm wrong.
I've watched that video
It's
like 3 times now, and I'm still getting more stuff every time I
I
watch it.
wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the listener.
I
so
know, but I have a
so
problem.
so there's an article um that popped up when you do a search of Spielberg aliens in Google. The second thing is Close Encounters of the Third Kind article in the Library of Congress, written by Matt Zoller Seitz.
Okay.
And it says, as a child growing up, Steven Spielberg was fascinated by the concept of UFOs. He had a youthful obsession that bore fruit decades later. Um, this movie and TV crazy suburban Groy grew up to become an expressive director. So he got through Duel, Sugarland Express, Jaws. Um, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when he talks about the effects of extraterrestrial contact, um, it was arguably um, a spectacle that suggests not just what extraterrestrial life might look like, but how proof of its existence might make us feel.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that as being like the theme overall of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I should really go back and watch that. It's been probably like 10 years since I've seen it, but it was a pretty incredible movie. It's Richard Dreyfuss is the lead role, right? You might know.
Um, Let me take a
That
look
sounds right to me.
back.
Let us know in the comments if we're wrong.
Yeah, roast me if I'm wrong.
Close
we
Encounters of
need
the Third
we need to start saying false information like crazy.
So,
Not that we don't already, so that people will correct us in the comments.
well, he was definitely in it. I'll say that much. I don't know whether or not.
I'm pretty sure he was the lead guy in it. But anyway, I've also heard that Steven Spielberg is on board with the "It's Us from the Future," like thousands and thousands of years in the
Right.
future, coming back. So I don't know. Spielberg, I think, probably knows stuff.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
talked
maybe.
about that in the Grush video too.
About what?
About it them being thousands people from thousands of years in the future. Like that's the path
Yeah.
that human evolution might take.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what you hinted at in your theory at our first episode. Was like, nuclear. The discovery of nuclear was like a timeline shift.
Right.
And like there was a timeline that went in this like atomic punk kind of like fallout level of like atomic energy kind of thing, and then there's us. Yeah.
Right.
And so
Right. Yeah.
maybe it's the atomic energy people in the distant future who are using that to split the atom or smash the atom and create black holes or wormholes in time.
So now that you've brought it up,
Mm-hmm.
so guys, CERN is trying to make another hadron collider.
Yeah, I don't know why you find this surprising.
Well, it's not that I find it surprising. It's not. It's just this needs to be stopped, if at all possible, in any way that we can.
Like,
I'm so against it. Like they're going to ruin this world. Maybe it's me coming back from the future, guys. Just being
yeah,
like, I told you so.
it's
Look
you
what's
pulling
gonna
the
happen.
Terminator.
Look what's gonna happen if you let them do this. Keep
I
doing
have to
this.
kill
Slam
David
it.
CERN before
Yeah.
he destroys the future.
I must destroy the sun.
You get a job at CERN and just like toss a potato in it one day.
Right.
Mission accomplished.
I toss a frog in it.
Frog
that-
Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
That's how you make a super frog right there. Ninja
Super
frog.
Yeah.
That
super
frog was sent to the future and is coming back to warn us to not do that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, but so something that I've been thinking about while listening to like I've been watching a lot of like videos on YouTube. There's interviews with science like people, and this goes back to the bigger CERN thing. It does. I'm hearing the term over and over again. I know this isn't a new term, but it's just popping up a lot in my feed, which is new science. And like the idea of to create new science, you have to kind of just do things bigger. Like you like so like really the only way to discover more about, atom collision and these like potentialities to create black holes and things like that and searching for the Higgs boson. The only way to really do that is just to make bigger and bigger colliders until
And that's
eventually
the
we're able to
problem.
discover something.
Damn.
That's the problem.
But that's true for like all science. Like that was a big theme with the India moon landing thing, was how much new science we're going to be able to do now that we're able to get there and put the stuff on there. And like that's just how science works. Like
I don't know.
we have to abuse the shit out of things in order to do some science and learn some stuff.
Maybe the problem is I'm kind of a just because you can doesn't mean you should person.
Sure.
And like that's like you really have to weigh the potential consequences of something before you just do it. And scientists don't care. Like they don't. Like they just don't care. Like
I just love how you have this like mad scientist. No, you have this like mad scientist fetish or something, or fetish probably isn't the right word, but like an obsession with like this mad scientist ideal that like scientists just don't care. They're just out to figure out what they need to figure out. Damn the costs.
I mean, that's what's been proven to me over time. Is that they do not care.
Individual scientists, I think, they're trying to solve their one problem,
right.
And they're probably not. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that they're probably more aware of the costs of things than most people are, having to justify them to the government. But I mean, I think that they might. I could see. They must think that their problem is the most important thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and so to go back to Oppenheimer for a second, when you're watching the movie, they talk specifically about how there's a 1% chance that when they explode this bomb, it's going to catch like the Earth on fire.
Oh yeah.
And their response to that at first is like, man, that's pretty serious. And then it cuts over to Oppenheimer, and he's just like, eh,
Press
like,
play.
like,
That
like,
seems like a bit of a
eh.
dramatization, though.
Like it's a possibility, but it's not likely. And so
Right.
because it's not likely, it's worth a shot. And that's the attitude that I'm worried about. Like, just like, yeah, there's a possibility we could blow up the world using the by colliding atoms, but it's not likely. So
Oh, you know what? I did want to go back and touch again another Grush video thing. I think this was in his video. Was the whole idea of string theory being a psyop?
Oh man, yeah, that was in there too.
Yes, and I've been talking about that for a long time. I can't remember if I've actually talked about it on the podcast or not, though, or if it was
you
I think you
haven't.
did. Yeah.
presentation.
No, I don't think you have.
Yeah, I don't think I have either, and I wish I
I've
had
heard
because I'd have some proof that I've been talking about this for a long time.
I've heard a lot about it more recently,
Hmm.
but I don't think you've talked about it on the podcast. I think it's just been around.
Right. So the
Okay.
the theory is that in the 40s and 50s, while all of this like psyops, now declassified stuff was going on about anti-gravity, is also around the time that string theory came out. And the idea of it being a psyop is that it's so closely, like, it so well mirrors what we view in reality. Like, it does such a good job of making connections that are close enough to explaining things, but it's just like like it's not fake science, but
Well, but they said in the videos there's nothing you could do with it.
right, yeah, like, it can tell us a lot of things, but what can you do with it? And it was like implanted in the like scientific psyche that this was like the thing that would lead to a theory of everything. And so many people dedicated their lives to it, but in reality it was just meant to keep people off of the correct track, which apparently had something to do with the anti-gravity thing. Certainly it wasn't all about the anti-gravity thing, but like there was this whole other layer of science and physics that went ignored and buried in favor of string theory, and how that could potentially be like a really deep psyop.
Right. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's easier to see into the past far than it is close, right? But I mean, it does kind of seem like the last big accomplishment with physics is like splitting the atom, and then okay, they're pretty much done.
Right. Well, I mean, the big hope is though for a theory of everything, like
Sure.
something, some kind of formula that can, at its very core, explain the fundamentals of nature and reality. And like, I get the appeal of string theory being that thing, but I don't think it is, and I think that there's a lot of people wasting a lot of time and energy and money on something that's not going to amount to anything.
So so this has been talked a lot about a lot by Eric Weinstein, um, who's probably one of the more popular theorists out there. And after some conversations with other theorists, I mean, his word quote is, "I have nothing against string theory per se, as string theory doesn't hurt anyone, but I'm absolutely committed to the idea that if we do not purge string theory culture and quantum gravity culture and get back to collegially self critique ourselves, that this field will die." Essentially, that string theory leads nowhere.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and so and so when you see this kind of turn, um, you really have to wonder, has this been a thing, that is this the math that's been given to the public to study, when
Right.
there's other math that lives out there that's correct.
Right. Were
um,
we given this as a distraction
right.
from finding out a deeper truth?
Right. So there's definitely thought by popular theorists out there that string theory is nothing but a waste at this point. Not saying it may not be helpful in some ways, but it's not where science goes. Um, well,
Well,
I mean, we'll have to see what happens from that. But
maybe it's some kind of like fundamental truth about the universe that the aliens gave over to help lead physics off track. Like something that they know that they've spent hundreds of years figuring out. Once they had already discovered interdimensional travel.
well, it's the thing about it is string theory in and of itself and quantum gravity are both really interesting, right? Like they're super interesting
Right.
and exciting to think about, right? Like there's this idea that you can really sink your teeth into and get excited over.
Right, and it's
And
playing God. It's messing with the very particles of reality. The very things that make everything tick. You
so
know.
what scientist wouldn't want to be the one to crack that code? And so now you have most scientists in that specific field looking into this one specific thing
Sure.
instead of coming up with their own ideas. And I think that's really what they get at, is that we're hindering process because everybody's focused on this one thing, when at max there should be 10 people looking at this thing.
Right.
Like,
Well,
I mean, that's a generalization. Yeah, it's a generalization, but essentially, like, there's other places to focus on where we can actually advance science, and there's no actual end to string theory. I mean, we don't know if that's true or not, right? Like, we don't actually
right,
know if that's
right.
true, but if nothing new's being created and everybody's just we're spinning our wheels for 50 years looking at the same thing, like, doing the same thing over and over is insanity, yada yada yada. Like, that's what we're doing as a culture. Like, maybe it's time we kick it off and start looking at some new ideas.
Yeah.
And if you're a quantum physicist out there studying string theory and you're thinking to yourself, this is a bunch of bullshit. I can't believe they're saying this right now. You should contact us. We'll have you on the show. Reach out
Hell
to us on
yeah.
socials, please. Prove we're wrong. Like, you don't have to prove anything, but we will just have a fun conversation with you about it.
Certainly.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation with you about it. And I mean, we are non-science people talking about something extremely sciencey.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I know
Like,
absolutely nothing
like
about
the
any of
fact that
this.
I just used the word sciencey
Yeah.
should give you the idea of kind of what that means. But
Well, all science is wrong, and if anybody wants to come in and tell me that I'm wrong, that would be a great interview.
and you can give all the comments you want about how much you like CERN. I will come find you and argue with you. You'll get my personal attention. So feel free to leave those comments and feedback.
Yeah, and
Guys,
Wiggy, unlike Jackie, is really bad at arguing on the internet, so this is a good one to engage in, guys. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah. You'll probably win, but you're not going to change my mind on this one.
Right, you'll win, but you'll prove nothing to him. Yep.
Yeah, you'll prove nothing. But I'll engage you for sure.
I'm still really hung up. I'm hung up on the idea that what Jeff said earlier about like the new science of the future being bigger and better. I'm just imagining bioengineering a really big apple so someone can beam me in the head with it and I can discover gravity too.
Yeah, Gravity 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where it's at. Although I think Monsanto is already working on that Apple patent. So
Damn. I just got to
You
go
should
sit under
over-
their trees.
yeah, you just got to go bust into the Monsanto research facilities where they're growing the giant apple trees and just have a little sit, man. You're on your way.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us for today. Thank you for listening to our shenanigans and our information on Aliens 2. We really appreciate you guys, and we look forward to having you listen to our next episode. Just as a shout out, this is episode number 10.
Woo!
So
Woo!
we have hit the first milestone. So celebrate us in the comments. You can even visit us on our link tree and give us a celebratory drink. if you'd like. But other than that, we'll let you go, and we'll see you guys later.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Later.